good morning, everyone. Good day to those coming from different time zones. Welcome to today's FHIR Connectathon webinar hosted by UP Manila Salab. I'm Gabby Velasquez, your moderator for today's session. So at UP Manila Standards and Interoperability Lab, our mission is to strengthen digital health capacity here in the Philippines, driving progress towards universal health coverage. That's why this year, our focus extends beyond our team. We are committed to empowering our broader community with valuable insights on health interoperability, AI or artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and health data standards. Now, to prepare for our June 2025 FHIR Connectathon next week, these pre-event webinars aims to orient the community, the developers, the implementers, and policymakers on the draft Philippine Core Interoperability Guide or Core IG. And so for today, we will have a walkthrough of the June 2025 Connectathon, its structure, objectives, tracks, and how to use FHIR IGs effectively. So we hope you're excited to learn, share, and connect with our fellow members of our community of practice. And we'd also like to express our gratitude to our partners, the CSIRO, Australia, and BPAT, for their support in this capacity building initiative. All right, so now let's dive in. So last week, we held our first pre-Connectathon webinar featuring insights from Dr. Alvin Marcelo and Mr. John Carter of CSIRO Australia, who's also in the call right now. So during the session, they provided an in-depth analysis of the draft core FHIR IG, highlighting its essential components and functionalities. So they discussed how the IG is designed to facilitate seamless health data exchange, emphasizing its potential to improve interoperability across various healthcare systems. And of course, if you remember, they gave us a brief discussion on the difference between what's a core IG, what's the difference with the NHDR IG. And this broader context is actually crucial for understanding the framework's role in advancing health information technology and ensuring better coordinated care among providers here in the country. And so for this morning, to continue our preparation for the June 2025 FHIR Connectathon happening next week, let me introduce our esteemed speaker, Dr. Michael Lolly. Dr. Lolly serves as a principal research scientist at CSIRO, where he is recognized as a global leader in the field of health data interoperability. With a rich background in the development of terminology services and FHIR tooling, he has been instrumental in advancing these technologies across various regions. So his expertise is not only profound in theoretical concepts, but also profoundly practical, contributing to real-world implementations that, of course, enhance healthcare data exchange and integration. So for today, Dr. Lolly will lead us through an in-depth exploration of the Connectathon tracks. So he'll provide insights into the structure, the goals of each track, outlining the specific scenarios and use cases that our participants will engage with. And furthermore, he'll guide us on how to effectively utilize the FHIR implementation guides, ensuring that everyone, especially here in the call, everyone understands the guidelines and what are the best practices for implementing FHIR standards in their own projects. So his presentation is set to be a comprehensive resource, equipping our participants with the necessary knowledge to navigate challenges in health data interoperability and, of course, successfully implementing FHIR solutions. Now, without further ado, let us virtually welcome CSIRO's Dr. Michael Lolly. Over to you, Dr. Michael.
So that was an introduction that's probably a little bit overblown for what I'm going to present here. Really, I guess one of the key things to take away for the Connectathon is that it's an activity where you want to lean in, get involved, try things out, experiment, and learn by doing. So from that perspective, there are no wrong answers. That you will try things. You expect some things to work and some things to not work, and the ultimate goal is to learn, to take away new knowledge, to discover gaps and problems and to share those with others. So there's also the other part of the Connectathon objectives, the sort of the broader objectives are this building a community, sharing knowledge, and gathering gathering feedback. So one of the things you will, of course, get is hands-on introduction to FHIR. You'll learn the basics, and the tracks you'll see start with the very initial parts of the FHIR specifications and interactions. The activities are built around exchanging data, testing the services that are provided, but also anything that you bring along in terms of your own FHIR servers, either clients or server end, and then the feedback that we gather out of this can then lead into future drafts and evolution of the implementation guides, setting priorities for future work, and that includes not just the specs, but also what might be required by the community in terms of new skills, new experiences, other tools, and so forth. I've got a link at the bottom. I encourage you to visit this link before the event. You'll find detailed information about the tracks, the available tools, links through to those tools, sample data, and so forth. Important thing, and I'm sure John emphasised this at the previous presentation, that the implementation guides that we'll be looking at are drafts. They're works in progress. So there will be things that are incomplete in terms of scope, in terms of correctness and accuracy. They'll vary, and this is to be expected. Part of the key outcomes are to identify those things. Some of them will be already known, some of them will be unknown. There may be choices that have been made in specifying constraints or other aspects of the FHIR specifications that don't work in particular contexts, so they create problems. Identifying those is really important, and then working towards either alternate ways of exchanging data that doesn't fit into parts of the implementation guides, or relaxing some of the constraints. Is some of the outcomes that can come from a connectathon like this. Often connectathons have parallel tracks, so there's multiple things being worked on, and people working in separate activities. For this connectathon, we have 2 tracks, but they're sequential. So the second track builds on the first track. So what you work through in the first track can then be picked up on and developed further in the second track. If you follow the link I had up earlier, you'll find that there are some sample resources that you can use during the tracks. But the other key thing is that if you have samples of your own data in your own systems, or that you construct during the connectathon, to be trying those out as well. So building examples on the day is also part of the activities. We have 3 track leads: Cherry from the Department of Health, Teo from Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, and John Carter, who's part of the SSCP program that CSIRO is running. So they'll be the track leads. There will be others of us there, myself included, who will be moving around and helping out, answering questions where we can, um, and um, and so forth during the 2 days. There'll be a number of tools and servers provided for you. Key amongst those is the Happy server. This was the primary place that you'll be able to upload resources and try out the FHIR APIs, where you're interacting with terminology. There's a separate terminology server, and so those will be available throughout the 2 days. There may be people attending who bring along their own servers, and if so, we will endeavour to make those endpoints known to you so you can test against different servers and see what sorts of issues and capability and functionality they provide as well. There's the FHIR validator that you'll be able to use to validate the resources that you create or produce, and either for straight validity or with respect to any of the implementation guides that we're looking at. We have sample files, as I said before, that conform to the Core profile. There are some various different ways of interacting with the servers. So there's an interactive user interface that you can use through your web browser, but you also be able to use Postman either directly or in support with the Postman collection to directly interact with the endpoints. And for anyone who's more comfortable with Swagger or OpenAI type of interface, that will also be available with a Happy server. There are other tools as well, and links to those are also found on the web page I listed before. Diving into track one. So this is about looking at the creation of resources. So it's writing to a FHIR server. And so the general context here is some point of service application submitting data to a health data repository. So this may happen in the context of a patient arriving in a clinic for a routine checkup or to manage a chronic condition. And then during that encounter, various data will be collected and need to be recorded and submitted. And that may include observations, may include prescription of medication, updating immunization records, and so forth. So what this track will be looking at is using the draft implementation guides, key resources such as patient encounter, medication, observation, but not limited to those resources, and creating instances of them, validating them, and then uploading them individually to a server. So that's just one by one. But then as a second activity, looking at constructing a bundle, which is a collection of resources that would be related. So this is quite a common scenario. You don't necessarily create resources one by one. You often have a collection of resources that reference each other. In particular, an encounter resource and the observations that took place during that encounter. So those resources all linked together, and you want to upload them all together to the FHIR server. So the second activity will be looking at doing that, creating collections and uploading and storing the collections of items. And we'll be looking at success criteria, like you were successfully able to upload them, whether or not they passed validation, what some of the issues are if they didn't pass validation, um, and it's also important to not just test the happy paths of success, but also what happens for failure. So what kind of information comes back when a resource doesn't match the implementation guide and you try and upload it, or what happens when you try and upload a set of resources that's in a collection that's incomplete. So an encounter referencing a missing observation. Does the server provide sufficient information coming back? So testing both success paths and failure paths is also part of doing these kinds of activities. Following track one, we will be looking at track two, which of course builds on track one. And this is the sort of retrieval scenario. So the context in which you're likely to do retrieval is obviously if you're looking for an existing patient who's returned, you want to pull back that patient's records. You may be doing analytics, so you may be looking at a cohort of patients and a set of resources that meet some criteria. And also, if you're doing something like a pre-population of a questionnaire, so filling out a form and you want to pre-populate the fields with data that had been previously collected, then you need to be able to provide appropriate search criteria to retrieve that relevant data for pre-population. So again, we're using the implementation guides. The initial focus will be on the patient and observation resources, but not limited to that. And we're to look at not just retrieving those specific resources, but also retrieving linked resources. And so this is something that the FHIR APIs support, because often you want to search for a patient, but bring back the encounters that are related to that patient or the observations. So we'll have a number of activities there: searching by name, retrieving observations given a patient ID, maybe looking at some more advanced features like sorting. So you might want to get back the recent, the most recent observations rather than just the first N that happened to match. So I've mentioned a couple of times that collecting feedback, understanding, documenting what you tried, what worked, what didn't work for you, and that's in terms of what your requirements might be. So some of these, what worked and what didn't work, will be sort of general issues. Others might be specific to requirements that you have for your personal use case or your system or your environment. What gaps did you discover? Were there things that you thought the IG should have covered, but they didn't cover? Are there things in your data that you wanted to represent that you couldn't represent? Were there any blockers? So any things that you felt would prevent or be a significant challenge in the draft IGs, and generally just any feedback about the technical challenges. Positive things as well, were there tools, were there things that you did that worked really well for you? So just any and all feedback that you want to share with us and the other people at the Connectathon is really valuable. As I said, there are no wrong answers here. It's about rolling your sleeves up and trying things out and seeing what happens. So that's a quick walkthrough of the tracks, what to expect, the kinds of tools, the actual details. Again, if you follow that link to the web page, you'll find the details there. And I guess at this point, I'm happy to open up for any questions that people have.
Thank you, Doc Michael. So now you've learned the different tracks, the objectives, and the different tools and servers our participants need for the Connectathon. Now we're opening the floor to questions. Are there any questions from the group? Again, you have three options. You can either use the raise hand function if you want to ask your questions live, or you can type in your questions in the chat box, or if you want to ask anonymously, I think we've enabled the Q&A button for that. There, yes, it is enabled. So, hi, Dr. Michael. There's a question from Sir JL Dalisay of South Cotabato. So, what would happen after the Connectathon? He's just curious what might happen or what's going to be the next steps after
Yeah,
the
so
perhaps.
thank you. Yes. So there's a couple of things. One is that the feedback that's relevant to each of the IGs will be collated and fed back to the teams that are developing out those IGs so that they can respond as appropriately and adjust things. You will no doubt meet people and build new connections. And I think that's the other part of a connectathon. It's not just connecting systems, it's also connecting people. So there's a growing network. Yes, and just for that other question, I'll put the link back up and these slides will be shared.
Hi, Dr. Michael. There's a question sent privately to me. Maybe you can share again the track. I think they joined a bit late. So just a brief overview maybe of the Connectathon tracks for those who were not able to catch it early on.
Right. So let me go to the two tracks.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
just to review the two tracks, the tracks will be in sequence. So we'll do track one, and there'll be several sessions for it, and then followed by track two. Track one will be about the creation of compliant FHIR resources and their validation and uploading to a FHIR server. So we've got the PH Core implementation guide, the HDR implementation guide. And so looking at the creation of those resources, so that's an exercise in itself. The validation of the resources against each of the implementation guides where relevant. And then the technical aspects of uploading them individually to the FHIR server, but also as a collection of related resources using a bundle. And we will have the happy FHIR server that will be available for that activity. But if others have other servers that they make available, then they can be tested as well. In track two, we'll be looking at searching and retrieving. So of course, all the things that have been successfully uploaded will be sitting in the FHIR server. And we'll be looking at the search API, how to retrieve the desired resources using the FHIR search API, and also related connected resources. So there's a number of different activities there, and also some of the more advanced search features like the linked resources and sorting.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Michael. So again, the track one is for POS data submission, and track two is for search and retrieval. So thank you so much,
That's right.
Sir Les, for the question. Okay, so we have a question here from the chat box. So what are the different use cases for the NHDR IG and the page core IG?
Okay, so the PH Core IG, so um, is really there as a its intent is to be a foundational layer. So normally what a national core implementation guide does is that it captures um, the sorts of things that are specific to the national ecosystem. So it's usually very general and open. It doesn't lock anything down too much. It often addresses issues like national identifiers, um, perhaps some nationally relevant um, code systems or value sets, um, um, things that are likely to be relevant across many different use cases, and you want consistency across those different use cases. So, hence, a national patient identifier or a national patient identifier scheme. You want that in the core so that all the other IGs that you're using um, have a consistent way of working. And so the intention then is that other IGs will depend on the core, and so they will inherit the constraints from the core as a base level, and then they will add in additional constraints and profiles and so forth that are specific to a particular use case. So in that sense, um, the NHDR IG would be defining a set of constraints that's specific to the NHDR, the National Health Data Repository, and it would inherit from PH Core, so it would be aligned, and anything that um, is valid with respect to the NHDR IG would additionally and automatically be valid with respect to the PH Core IG. And then if you had another IG that, for example, was around service requests or referrals, then where those sets of data overlap in PH Core, they would be consistent.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Michael. And I think, if I remember it correctly from Dr. Alvin's lecture last week, the NHDR Fire IG is more tailored to reporting, I think for
Yes, so
surveillance purposes also. Is that right, Dr. Michael?
I think that's fair. I'm not intimately familiar with it, but you know, it's there are obviously many different possible use cases, um, and they do range from immediate clinical care, clinical workflows through to reporting and analytics. And so, especially if you're in a reporting and analytics space, you want alignment with the clinical care um, IGs, and that's what the PH Core gives you, so that the data that's collected in the process of delivering healthcare um, is already there for the analytics and reporting.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Michael. So I would just like to add and read Sir Umer's response. So in addition to what Michael has suggested, since the IGs are in early draft versions, the Connectathon tracks have been developed in a way that would be generic and will provide a building block for most use cases involving data submissions for the track one and retrieval for track two, such as research submission, bundle submission, search. Okay. So are there any other questions from the group?
Gabby, hello.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hi. Hi, Michael. Good morning. Um, I just need to ask, are we required to prepare instances for the profiles? I mean, the resource for the like actual examples.
Actual examples. So there are some already that you can build on. You can construct some on the day, so during the Connectathon. But if you are able to prepare and bring some along already prepared, then that also will be very useful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sir Les. Are there any other questions from the group? Okay, here's one from Sir JL again. So in the current draft of the Philippine Core FHIR IG, patient resource use the PhilHealth ID number as the primary identifier. So given that the PSA is also involved in the Connectathon and manages the Philippine system PhilSys ID system, is there a national policy direction or consensus on which identifier PhilHealth or PhilSys ID should be used as the primary and permanent patient identifier in the FHIR ecosystem? Or will this be discussed during the Connectathon?
I don't think that's a question I can answer.
Yes, I think.
But I can say, if that's the answering and discussing issues like that is one of the activities that goes on in a Connectathon. What are the strengths and weaknesses of each one, and and maybe does it have to be one or the other, or can you support both?
Yes, since patient identifier can be multiple. And I believe we have plenary speakers from PSA and the ICT. Maybe our participants can ask their questions there during the Connectathon proper itself for our plenary speakers. So are there any? Yes, go ahead, Dr. Mike.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this is potentially an example for how a core sort of provides value. Is the core may not make or specify that decision. It may make sense that one set of identifiers is useful in one set of circumstances and another identifier is useful in a different set of circumstances. What core might then do is say, when you use one of this ID, this is how you do it. And when you use the other one, this is how you do it. But it won't force you to use one or the other. And then the other IGs then make the choice or the determination of which one is the preferred one in a given circumstance.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michael. Maybe the question can be rephrased in a way that in a FHIR ecosystem, should there be only one primary and permanent patient identifier, or can it have multiple patient identifiers?
A common theme in FHIR is inclusivity, and so restricting to only one is generally not what's done. Generally, you allow multiple where multiple exist, but you might have a preference for one type over another.
Great.
Hey, Michael, it's John Carter. I might just jump in on this because it's a really
Hi,
good
Sir
question.
John.
It's a great question. I don't have my video on because I'm on a limited bandwidth today, so apologies. You can't see my face, but hello. We have in the draft core IG, we have only allowed the PhilHealth ID and the dialysis ID, the PDD registration. But that's one of those great examples of something that is done as a draft, as a work in progress. And to have the discussion about PhilSys ID or PhilHealth ID or both or neither and what circumstances is exactly the kind of thing we hope to accomplish at the Connectathon. So that's a super important governance question that it's not a technical question. Technically, it's easy. We can have one ID or two IDs or 10 IDs, but governance-wise, it's hugely important. And I hope we'll have all the right people in the room next week to start that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sir John, for that supplementary response. So are there any other questions from the group? Going once, going twice. I believe we still have time for one final question before we wrap up. So is there anyone who would like to ask or maybe share a final thought?
Hi, Gab.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes, go Sir Lester.
Good morning again. Regarding the question from JL, this was discussed before when we were in Pampanga. Government hospitals were suggesting either the PhilSys ID or the PhilHealth ID. The problem with the PhilHealth ID was that not all patients have an PhilHealth ID, and consequently, not all uh, Filipinos or patients are do have PhilSys IDs. So that's a really good governance issue that needs to be tackled. Which ones should be used, or we have a unified, probably a unified ID that will cover all the bases. Uh, there, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Lester. Yes, we have a question, Sir Alomar.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Eladio Alomar from PSA. Actually, this regarding with the permanent identifier here in healthcare interoperability. Actually, we had a meeting yesterday with the PhilHealth, especially with their vice president. So he mentioned that one of the direction here is to use the national ID as in lieu of the PhilHealth ID, but it in still in the pipeline. I think that this is a policy decision. So maybe may I ask if PhilHealth is included here in the Connectathon on next week?
Yes, we
May,
have invited PhilHealth as well to join the Connectathon.
yeah, maybe it's a time to discuss this, especially if we're looking for the permanent identifier. Actually, the national ID is just actually it has a have a derivative, or maybe we can also link all the identifiers into one. So the national ID will be the foundational identity of all the patients. So I think it's better. And also right now we already registered almost 93 million of the Filipinos. So most of them have the national ID credential, and it will be used as the identifier in case of all the transactions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for raising that. Yes, I think important discussions will be happening next week on the Connectathon. So very, very exciting. Uh, thank you so much, sir, for sharing that. Okay, so I think Sir Les was the last one to raise questions. So are there any other question or any final
We
thoughts?
had one more. There's one more in the
Okay.
chat.
Okay, there. Why is the base canonical URL for the PH core URL? Will this be changed to hl7.ph?
Yeah, so there's a very good reason. The reason that it's something strange like example.com is so that you'll notice that and you'll know that this is not the official URI, not the official canonical URL. And we didn't want to put something sort of more plausible in there because the decision has not yet been made as to what it is. So it's in such an early draft state that we don't know what it's going to be. But we had to have something in there. So to that end, we put something that was obviously not the final thing, so that people didn't make the mistake of thinking that the draft one was the real one and run off and sort of depend on that.
Yes. Great. Thank you so much for catching the question, Dr. Michael. Yes, again, the example.com is just for the draft, and it will be changed to an official URL once there is an official already. Okay. So are there any other question? Okay. I think if not, let me just share back my screen. So there you have it. That brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you again to our dear speaker, Dr. Michael Lawley, and of course to all of you for joining us today. Once again, we invite you to our June 2025 FHIR Connectathon happening on June 16 to 17 at Hilton Manila, Pasay City. So see you there. So let's continue to connect, collaborate, and learn together. Once again, this is Gabby Velasquez. See everyone at Hilton Manila. Bye!